Yo, 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 what's going on, everybody? This is a Black Manga Critic here, and I'm back with another video for Patreon and YouTube. Now, if you want to become a patron and get 2 weeks early access to the Patreon videos, and that includes the Hunter x Hunter videos that I'm going to be putting out on Patreon, it's as low as $2, all right? With $2, you get access to all of the Patreon videos, all right? And if you want to join a higher tier, you get more access to different sorts of things, like the Discord and everything like that, all right? So, with that being said, shouts out to my patrons, Morning Haze, Ash, and Key. Y'all are dope. Love y'all to death. And let's get into the Hunter x Hunter stuff. So, we're going to be talking about Hunter x Hunter, obviously, and in particular, Rihan's Predator ability and how that Predator ability is related to the copious amounts of text that exists within Togashi's work. And why some of that text is useful and necessary for Togashi to tell the story surrounding Rihan's Predator ability and why he's using it, and other sort of bits and pieces related to Rihan and his sort of connections to other things. But how also, you know, maybe some of the text isn't necessary, right? How maybe, okay, what we could do is cut down a little bit here, cut down a little bit there. But we're going to get into a lot of that stuff and a lot of sort of the conversations surrounding that sort of wall of text that, you know, is kind of a staple within the anime community and the sort of conversations that surround that. So, before we sort of get into Rihan, we have to kind of talk about the sort of milieu and the environment that Rihan's sort of in, all right? Now, to kind of recap very quickly, we know that the Kakian Empire is, you know, the colonists. We know that. We already know that, all right? Like, they want to colonize new land. They want to, you know, expand the empire. That's what empires want to do. They want to expand the empire, okay? So they want to go to the Dark Continent in hopes of that. And they also kind of want to become this legendary empire, sort of in the way of like the Roman Empire, the Persian Empire, and all these other empires, right? The British Empire, all right? That are very much so legendary because of their ability to colonize. That's not a good thing, obviously. But that's something that the Kakian Empire would like kind of sort of aspires to. Now, we know that there is a succession war going on and that there are 14 princes that are vying for the king's throne, all right? For Huigoro's throne, all right? And I don't know if I pronounced that correctly, but whatever. You already know what it is. If you're reading this, you already know what it is. So we know that there are 14 princes. Some of them are women, some of them are men. And they all have guards, and they all have people that they all have people that are specifically loyal to them. But we also know that what sort of made to happen is that some of the people that are loyal to a particular guard don't necessarily get to guard their prince in a particular way. Excuse me. What that means is that you might see a guard that's loyal to Prince Benjamin, aka Rihan, all right, guarding another prince like Sally. And that's something that we see, and that's something that I'm going to talk about in this video. So that's just a little recap for you in terms of what's going on. All of this stuff is also going on in the Black Whale. We know that, all right? But I'm not going to tell you every single little thing that's happening, but I just wanted y'all to know, like, this is sort of what's going on. And it's really important that you know that because it also goes into why certain amounts of text are necessary to sort of expound upon Rihan's sort of character and his Predator ability. So when we get into Rihan, even before we sort of get into the Nen ability, we kind of have to talk about his situation. Now, I just talked about that a little bit, talking about how, you know, there's a succession war going on and how, you know, even though he's loyal to Prince Benjamin, he has to guard Sally because that's who Prince Benjamin put him on, right? Now, what we also have to know is that in those types of situations, you're not going to have a lot of conversation happen unless it's absolutely necessary. That means that, okay, if you see Rihan in a particular panel and while he's guarding Sally, he's not going to talk much, if at all. Why? For a few reasons. Part of those reasons are related to his Nen ability, but the main sort of reason is because look at the situation. If he talks with anybody or he indulges in casual conversation with anybody, with a bodyguard that is loyal to another prince, or in front of one of the princes, imagine if he, right? That would lead to so many issues. All right, like he might let something slip. Somebody might read into his mannerisms or, you know, what he said about someone or something or about a prince, and they might take information from that. So it behooves Rihan to be like silent. He's not gonna say nothing. All right, like so that's why you're not gonna see a lot of dialogue, right? He's just gonna, all right, tight-lipped. Also, it's really important that he thinks about a lot of things, most notably his Nen ability and how his Nen ability can be as strong as it can possibly be. A few things about his Nen ability. We know its name is Predator. We know it's a conjuration type. What's also even more important is that the more information he procures on his own, right, the stronger his Predator ability will be. And the more accurate that information is, the stronger his Predator ability will be. We also know that if his Predator ability, whether he uses it or not or whatever, he can't use Nen for 48 hours after activating that Predator ability. So he's got to make sure, like, if like he activates this ability, it better go off without a hitch. Because if it doesn't, he is very much so vulnerable. All right? And folks don't really care too much about bodyguards. Like, you know, like, I mean, they care, but not really. Not really. That's not to say that we don't see, you know, people trying to get revenge on individuals getting killed or anything like that. But the bodyguards are a little disposable. And if Rihan dies, Prince Benjamin will just kind of get his ability via his Benjamin Button ability. So it's a bit of a win-win for Benjamin, all right? Now, what we have to also talk about is that because his ability warrants this, and because people can't tell him what someone else's ability is made of or constitutes, that means that he's going to be doing a lot of thinking, all right? And that's why we see so much text whenever Rihan's on the page. When we hit, and this is the thing. If Rihan's on the page, he's going to be thinking. So in 381, we see him thinking a lot. He's being very, very, very meticulous, right, in chapter 381. He's being very meticulous about his Nen abilities, right before he activates his Nen ability. Because if he doesn't, he's going to be extremely vulnerable. Extremely vulnerable. So he's thinking about everything. He's making sure he's checking off all the things off his list. The Nen Beast, Sal's Nen Beast can do this, 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 can do this. And he has to do that because if he doesn't, he's screwed, right? He's screwed after he activates his ability. So that's why we see a lot of the text. Now, in 381, I think the text is totally fine. There's a certain amount of text that makes sense, right? For Rihan and for his environmental predicament, right? That being on the Black Whale and guarding Prince Saleh and making sure that, his ability works 100%, right? Like, it has to be accurate as hell, okay? So we see that, and that makes sense. Right, and because he does what he needs to do, and he's thinking, and he does everything right, Saleh's Nen Beast is out of here, is gone, eaten, gobbled up, done for, all right? And that's fine. And I don't think people generally had an issue with that amount of text there, right? The issue comes a bit later. Now, again, like, when we get to 388, we're going to be taught, right? I'm not going to be like, oh, well, Togashi has to make sure there's so much text. No. I'm going to try to be as fair as humanly possible here, all right, when it comes to sort of talking about that particular chapter. So, when we get to chapter 388, that's where the infamous wall of text shows up. Y'all know what I'm talking about, all right? It's going to appear on the screen pretty soon. When we get to the wall of text, we see a few things that are sort of happening here, all right? The first thing is that Rihan is sort of trying to make sure that, okay, I got to make, it's like, I got to make sure that, if I go after another Nen Beast or another prince or whatever it is that I'm doing, I have to make sure that, like, I am useful in that way and that, like, my Predator ability is useful for taking out a particular prince and doing all these things, right? What we see in that chapter is that Rihan is sort of realizing that, yo, this might not work out. This is not really the situation for me. Someone else might have to do this, right? Because his Predator ability might not be particularly useful. So what we see is all of that text of Rihan thinking. And again, Rihan can't just talk to the prince that he's currently guarding. He can't just talk to the other guards that are working for the other prince that he's guarding because of the situation. The situation demands that he just shut up, that he doesn't say anything out loud, right? Because he's not loyal to the prince that he's presently guarding. He's loyal to Prince Benjamin, who he's not with at the moment. So he has to think through all of these different scenarios and figure out, who should I go after? Should I go after Tubeppa? Should I go after Hulkenberg? And right, these are the two princes, right? These are two of the princes, right? Which one should I go after? And why should I go after them? He has to think about all these different things, because if he chooses the wrong prince, he's going to be super screwed, all right? Because anytime Rihan puts himself in a situation on this black whale, it's always going to be dangerous. But if he picks the wrong situation, it's going to be doubly dangerous. So he has to think all of this through as meticulously as humanly possible. Because if he doesn't, he puts himself in a situation where he'll probably end up being extremely vulnerable, because he might try to use the Predator ability, right, and fail and not be able to use that for 48 hours. Or he might not use the Predator ability and just be a sitting duck and not do anything and be absolutely useless to the prince that he's loyal to, which is Prince Benjamin. So here in chapter 388, in this wall of text, and it's on the screen right now, like, what you see is that, like I was talking about, Rihan is making sure that he's going through all of the different scenarios and all the different situations that he might have to deal with, or that he might put himself into, right? He's making sure that he's like, okay, what I've noticed here is that, right, on the right side of the screen, right, he's noticing in this panel that, yo, you know what, Tubeppa's Nen Beast doesn't really show up a lot. So, if at all. So I don't know what I'm doing here. I can't really gather any information if I don't see the Nen Beast do what it does at all. If I don't see the Nen Beast, I can't really come up with anything on my own, right? And again, any information from any of these guards or Tubeppa, right, or Tubeppa herself would immediately make his Predator ability useless. So right now, he realizes that he's kind of just like he's kind of not a sitting duck, but he's useless right now. He doesn't have any reason to be here. That's what he's thinking. So now he's trying to figure out, okay, in his mind, all right? In his mind, right? He's not saying any of this stuff out loud. He's saying it in his mind. It's not a lot of dialogue. It's actually, right, monologue, right? He's talking to himself, an internal monologue. So that's going to be a lot. There's going to be a lot of text there because he's thinking about all the different scenarios, okay? What we also have to understand is that, again, does all this text need to be here on the left side of the page? No, I don't think so. I think that we could have definitely cut out a few, like maybe 3 or 4, maybe, 3 or 4 sentences if we want to do that. Or even better, we could have just cut out some words that weren't, necessarily useful, like near impossible or something like that, right? But what we can say is that this chapter and this situation demanded quite a bit of text. It demanded it because it doesn't make any sense for us to sort of see what Rihan's thinking and have like very little, because Rihan's clearly a very intelligent individual. His conjuration ability, right, Predator, demands that he thinks a lot, that he be meticulous. So it makes sense that the text would be meticulous, right? It wouldn't make any sense if his thought processes were very basic and very vague, in the same way that like they might be in other manga, because again, the situation demands that his thoughts be meticulous. They demand that his thoughts be as accurate and as specific as humanly possible. Otherwise, he's going to be screwed. All right? Now, obviously, he's sort of realizing that, yo, I can't use the Predator ability here. So where should I go? Like, what should I do? So he's trying to figure that out. Now, what I will say is that I understand that, okay, we don't necessarily need the text to just like be, totally white in the background or anything like that. I think there are some ways that Togashi could have worked that out, and I agree with people who've said like, yo, maybe Togashi could have organized the text on the text in the panels a little bit differently. I agree with that. And what I'm going to be talking about later on sort of in this video, right, in a very quickly, is how I feel like Togashi in the next chapter, right, and even in chapter 388, he tries to sort of, do that a little bit, but it doesn't really work. And then there's one instance where I feel like it works very well. I think it's like, it's beautiful. So I'm going to put some of those things on the screen in a couple. But again, Rihan as a character demands a good amount of text, and that text has to be meticulous. It's got to be very particular, because if it's not, it wouldn't really reflect who Rihan is as a character, and it wouldn't reflect the level of thought that his Nen ability requires. Now, in this page, what we have is one of the royal guards for Prince Benjamin, right, telling Rihan, yo, you gotta think, man, you gotta think, because if you don't think, you won't be able to use your ability in the way that you need to, right? And you got to figure it out on your own. I can't help you in this situation because if I help you, I immediately make it so that your ability is useless, all right? So they can't help, like, right? These two in particular, they cannot help each other. These guards cannot help each other. They can't. So he's just telling me, you got to think, man. And what we also see is that he's keeping this in his mind because if he speaks out loud, others can hear him too, right? Like the other sort of guards can hear him too, and like if he were to give advice. So he can't say any of this out loud because of who he's around and everything like that. He's got to make sure that he's also thinking, that he's also contemplating things. Now, in this page, I think the text sort of works in a sense, but sometimes it doesn't. And where we also, and I'll talk about why that happens here, but I'll also talk about why it happens in the right side of the page with Tubepa. Now, what we see here is Tubepa also thinking. She's like, oh man, folks are coming after me. I gotta make moves, right? She's like, click, 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 clack on the keyboard. She's doing all these little things. She's making sure that, yo, I gotta protect my neck. So she's thinking. She is thinking. And of course, it demands this level of text because there is a bodyguard who works for Benjamin that is literally in the same room as Tubepa. So it makes no sense for her to say any of this stuff out loud. She's got to think. There's a reason why what you see in one of the panels is she says, "Okay, here's a flash drive for one of her workers." She's like, "All right, you know what? Take Hyson, take this, take care of this," and that's all she says out loud. She doesn't say anything else out loud. Everything else that you see on the page is her thinking. It's all internal monologue. So we have to be aware that that's what's happening here. We see a lot of internal monologue. All these characters are thinking, and it demands this much text because if you're not thinking meticulously, you're going to end up dead. You're going to end up dead, right? It doesn't make any sense for her to be like, well, do I go after this prince or that prince? I don't know. Maybe I should go after the other prince. Right? It is like if she had that kind of internal monologue, I'd be surprised if she was still alive at this point, right? Because it'd be ridiculous. So we have to make sure that we're always being aware of why the monologue, right? Why the internal monologues have to be particularly long and why they have to be meticulous as they need to be. Now, again, one thing that I said earlier is that it doesn't really work in this page because sometimes when you're trying to read the dialogue, there's pictures in the background and that muddies up the text. And it seems like Togashi is sort of trying to fix that, right? In terms of sort of trying to say like, hey, okay, I know that I can't just have a page where I don't have any images at all necessarily. I need to make sure that there's some sort of mixture. And I think he's trying to do that here. And sometimes it works, right? Where you see, where if you see the one of the prince's royal guards, the bald dude with the, the bald dude with the black dude with the scar on his face, right? You see that, right? And I think that works pretty well. But then there are other panels that don't work particularly well, where you see Tubepa in the panel on the right side of the page, and the text is it's not super difficult to read, but it's more difficult to read than it should be, right? Also the page with the laptop, that's also a little too cluttered, all right? And then there's the page with the sort of like background effects, right? On the left side of the page, you see that, and it's difficult. It's difficult to sort of figure out like what's sort of being like read there. For me, for someone with eyes like mine, I already start to strain a little bit. So I think there are moments where you have to be really aware of what you're putting in your panels and whether your readers will be able to read it comfortably. That's really important. For me, I can read the text that was in the sort of just like the blank panels comfortably, but I also understand what people are saying when they're like, yo, what's going on? There's a lot of stuff here. This is weird. Like, where's the images? This is a manga, and we do like images, and we do like to see images. So I think that's fine. I think that's a valid complaint to have, right? I don't think people should be like, this isn't manga, or this is terrible. What's going on here? Sort of very much so overreacting in certain ways. Just like calling Togashi lazy and all these other things. I think that's ridiculous. But I do think it's a valid criticism to be like, yo, like usually panels of manga have like that are this big have text and image in it. So I get that. So I think Togashi does eventually try to sort of fix that, right? He tries to sort of figure out this balance. Even though his back is hurting, right? And he's got an issue and he's got a back condition and he's trying to draw this manga for y'all. Even though all that stuff's happening, he's still trying to make it work. He's still trying to make it work. So that's what he does in 389. I think chapters 389, he does that a lot. And I think at one instance he tries it and it doesn't really succeed, and you have the same issues that you have in the last 2 pages of 388. And in 389, you get something that actually really works pretty well, I think. So let's look at 389. I'm just going to kind of put the image up on my screen because, again, I just want to make sure I'm looking at what I'm supposed to look at, all right? And I'm also going to put it up in this video, obviously. So what we have here is we have Basho thinking about, you know, making sure he sort of protects his own prints. So Basho's doing a lot of thinking as well because he can't really speak too much out loud. He can't really say too many things. He's got to be extremely careful. To be perfectly honest, Basho should be way more careful at the moment. He's not, to me, he's not being careful enough. He's having this very sort of, he's not, I don't want to say it's a candid conversation, but he's saying a lot, right? And he is thinking quite a bit too. But again, what happens here is that, again, I think especially on the right side, on the right page, on the right side of this page, right, what we see in 389, is that it's a little difficult to read the text because the pictures and the images are all kind of smushed together. The pictures and the images and the text are all kind of smushed together, and it's just hard to read. It's just, like, for me, it's a little tough on my eyes. I don't like that, and I think other people probably don't like that either. So to me, that's not an instance where I think Togashi succeeds. Where I do think he succeeds is this one panel where we see Basho and he's thinking about what he should do, and I think that's pretty easy for me to read, right? There are also sort of little panels where, right, there are little panels, right, like the one on the left side of the screen here, where we see that he's talking about a hierarchical society, blah, 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 blah. And that I can read that pretty effortlessly. I don't need any images in those panels. That's not super necessary for me. I don't need any like distinct images in those tiny panels. All right, but you do see that Togashi sort of tries to put something in there anyways. All right, and that's fine and whatever. But again, it's just difficult to read. I can barely see who the other person is in that panel. It muddles everything up, so it doesn't really work. And this is the thing for me. I think at some point Togashi was like, you know what? I have to decide whether I need to make the text easier to read, and if so, what do I do? And if Togashi decides that, yo, I'm just gonna make sure that I don't put any images in like in the Rihan page, in the wall of text page, that's what he decides to do. And it also just like alleviates his back a bit. He doesn't have to worry about putting images in those panels or drawing anything in those panels, and that's fine because again, he has a legitimate excuse not to do that. He's got back problems. All right, so that's a decision that he made. Now, does that mean we can't critique that? Like critique what's there? No, it just means that it makes sense that maybe he just decided, yo, I don't want to do that. I don't want to put that there. But he did decide later on that he was like, you know what? I might have panels where there's not much text, but what I am going to do is I'm going to try to limit that. So he chose to try to limit that. And you see that in the image here with Hunter x Hunter 389, where you see one panel on the right side of the screen where he's like, oh, okay, I'm going to put a little like sort of paragraph here, and there's a lot here. And I think, to me, it's fine, right? There's a lot of information there talking about sort of like, you know, what's going on with Prince Hulk, like eliminating Prince Hulkenberg and talking about enforcing martial law and all these different things. And he's thinking things through, right? Because he's got to be very meticulous as well. But I don't think it works here. I think where it does work is this next page. And I'm going to put this up now. I'm going to put this up right here, all right? Because I want to make sure that I can see it. I want to make sure that I can see the page too. So, you know, if you see me just kind of moving things around, it's just me putting the page up. So here's the page. So I'm going to put it up for y'all too. Now, in this page, what you see is, oh, the text and everything kind of works together in a really nice way, I think. There's, right, I can sort of tell what's going on in the images on the right side of the screen. All right, on the right, that you see on the right side of the screen. I can tell what's going on, what's being mentioned. A lot of this stuff is talking about Camilla and sort of individuals that Camilla has put under her command to act as sort of cursed soldiers, right? And this is actually really interesting here what's sort of going on. And there's a video that I want to do and talk about later on. That might even be my next video. I might do that. But we're talking about the text and all that stuff. But I think there's a really nice balance here, right? We see that, okay, the text is in these nice rectangular panels, and that works really nicely, right? They're in these little rectangular panels, and we can read the text pretty easily, but we can also see what's going on in the background pretty easily, right? I think that strikes a nice balance. And I think both of these pages are really orderly in a nice way. They're really, to me, they're very pleasing to my eye because they're sort of symmetrical in certain ways. And I think they're pleasing to other readers too, right? We get a very clear sense of what's going on, who each soldier is, and what they're doing and what their roles are in these 2 pages. It's very, very clear, right? And I think that's something that Togashi can sort of work with in the future. I feel like if Togashi did something like one of these 2 pages, right, particularly the right page, in place of Rihan's sort of page where it was just kind of like barely any images and like just sort of a wall of text, I think that would have been great. Now, again, I'm not saying that the text doesn't need to be there. I think a lot of that text is necessary. I do. I think a lot of that text is necessary because it expounds upon Rihan's ability. It's right. Like Rihan does say quite a few things about his ability in 381, but he also expounds more, right? He also explains more and explains things that we need to know in 388, right? And also, it's not just him explaining about his ability, but also it shows us his thought process about the fact that, right, that he's lamenting like, yo, my ability might not really work here. What do I do? Who do I go after, right? And I think that works there. But again, I think Togashi definitely he definitely needed like a balance, right? A balance to sort of work with everything. So that's kind of how I'm thinking about it, all right? And I think, again, Togashi sort of found a balance that kind of works. And I hope Togashi sort of maintains that if he can, right? If he feels like, yo, I'm going to put this out, but I might just like leave this panel empty, whatever. I'm not really going to necessarily complain about that. But I think you can critique it. I just think you can't go like super, to the far right and be like, oh, this is garbage, this is terrible, Togashi sucks as a mangaka, this is awful. I think that's ridiculous. I actually think that's like actually ridiculous. And I think people that do that are a little ridiculous. So they need to relax a little bit, all right? But again, you can be critical. Definitely. You can definitely be critical. So that's pretty much it for this video, all right, about Rihan and why I feel like the wall of text is sort of, I could defend it a little bit, but I could also be critical about it. And I feel like Togashi sort of found some sort of way to kind of balance that. And I think Togashi also realized, yo, maybe I went a little bit too far in terms of just not putting any images there at all. But again, I think people that go a little too far with the criticism and, badmouth Togashi in a very serious way. I think a lot of people are dead serious, but they'll be like, but some people will be like, I'm kidding. And I don't think those people are kidding. I think some of those people are dead serious, and they are serious because none of the stuff that they're saying is particularly funny. But there are people that I know who are joking and who are totally joking and who do like Togashi and who do like Hunter x Hunter and are fans of it and are fine. But they just like to joke, and they like to do it, and that is what it is. And I'm fine with that, and that's cool. I don't mind that. I don't mind a good joke. So thank y'all for coming through to this video. Hopefully you really liked it. Hopefully it clarified some things for you. And it was a video that I was thinking of doing for a long time, but I didn't know when I was going to do it. So I finally done it, finally recorded it. Thank y'all for coming through. All right. If you want more content like this, feel free to let me know in the comment sections below. All right. This video is going to be on Patreon, so it will be out either 2 weeks or 10 days after I've put it on a Patreon. I'm still thinking about whether I want to do 14 days or 10 days. All right. And you'll know, eventually. But when you know, you know. So thank y'all for coming through. Again, shout out to my patrons, Morning Haze, Key, and Ash, for supporting me. Y'all mean the world to me. Thank you so much. All right. And I'm going to be putting out a lot more Hunter x Hunter content. I'm going to try to put out like a Hunter x Hunter sort of video like this one once a week, because I think that's something that I can do. And I'm very familiar with Hunter x Hunter, so it's kind of easy for me to kind of get everything together and to pull the panels and stuff like that. All right. So thank y'all for coming through. I'm the Black Manga Critic, and also subscribe. All right. If you like the content, if you want more Hunter x Hunter content, I almost forgot about that. Subscribe, put a comment. I don't really care about the likes on a video or anything like that. But if you want to like, it is appreciated. But I'm not gonna like ask you to like or anything like that. I really care about comments because I love seeing what people have to say about things, and it really allows me to to sort of connect with y'all on a different level than just like you liking the video and then sort of moving on. Also, feel free to follow me on Twitter, where you'll get better notified for when videos are coming out, whether I do discussion streams on Hunter x Hunter and stuff like that. I do Hunter x Hunter discussion videos, like discussion videos that are live streamed. So if you come through to those, you'll be able to hear about it. And yeah, thank y'all for coming through. I didn't want this video to be too long, but this video is very long. But it's fine, because I think I did what I needed to do, and it's cool. Thank y'all for coming through. I'm the Black Manga Critic, and I'm out here.